Yeah, no, it's working now. So thank you.
Excellent.
Okay, so my name is Imbi Neeme, and I'm about to wow everyone with my sort of technical wizardry. Let me just make sure that I'm sharing the right screen with you. There we go. So yes. My name's Imbi Neeme. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're gathered on today. In my case, it's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I want to pay my respects to their elders past, present and future. And I particularly like to do this because storytelling has always been such an integral part of their daily lives on the land that I live on, that I write on, and that I tell my own stories on. So I am Imbi Neeme. I have written this book called The Spill, and I'm going to bore you senseless with my oh so amusing anecdotes and my amazing skills at PowerPoint. So I'll just click through. Yes, author type person. For some reason, that's what I decided to brand myself. This is actually being marketed as my debut novel. I'm 50 this year, but I really want to set the record straight and let you know that it is not my first novel. My first novel was actually published in 1976 when I was 5 years old. It was published in the school magazine, the school that I went to in Perth. And I remember very clearly how excited I felt and having written my first book, this story with so many words, and this just, you know, it was a moment of great pride when I saw my name in print. Of course, a few years later, I looked back and realized that it wasn't a book, it was a single sentence, but wow, what a sentence. And I'm gonna do a reading for you now. The Funny Planet. One day, a man went to a planet and explored it, and a rocket came and a funny turkey came out and asked if he would join in a party in his rocket. Imbi Neeme, year one. I particularly love this because I always remembered it was an alien who came out of the rocket ship, but it was a funny turkey, and not just a turkey, but a turkey with a capital T. So I really enjoyed that plot twist and felt that I was an inventive writer back then. But anyway, that feeling, that satisfaction, that pride that came from having that story published really stayed with me. So from a very early age, I really wanted to be a writer. I entered the teenage years where I wrote a lot. This is an actual picture of my surviving journals. Thank God not all of them survive. Between the years of 1983 and 1991, I pretty much wrote in a journal every single day. That's 8 years of word vomit. So let's all be thankful that there was a fire and I did burn quite a few of them. And then after I was at university, I studied English and theatre studies. I went and lived by myself in Japan for 2 years where I taught English, and I wrote an earnest and probably quite terrible novella on a power book exactly like this, which is probably more brick than it is computer. But I really, you know, spent a lot of time crafting this earnest and probably quite terrible novella. I think looking back, it was probably highly derivative. I was trying to be an Australian Jeanette Winterson. But one really good thing came out of that. I remember showing my dad, whose opinion I really respect, and asking him to read it. And he read it and he said to me, "I think you found your bliss, Imbi." And I've held on to that this was my bliss, writing was my bliss. And I thought, I'm on my way. Except I was not on my way. I then entered my own personal dark ages. So between the ages of about 25 and 37, I wrote virtually nothing except for a couple of screenwriting courses that I did when I was living in London. You know, I was busy. I tried to have a career for a bit. I got married and then I had 3 children. But, you know, during those 12 years, I still identified as a writer, albeit a writer who was doing precious little writing. But I think identifying as a writer is half the journey. And then after my 3rd child was born, I started writing again. A friend encouraged me to start a blog. I think I'd written one too many long, amusing anecdotes on Facebook, and she wanted to get me off her Facebook feed. But after I had Googled what is a blog, I signed up with WordPress and started Not Drowning Mothering. And I wrote there, you know, pretty much 5 times a week for about 3 or 4 years. I often like to describe the process of writing that blog as writing it with small children dangling off me like Christmas ornaments. But it was really very much like that. I would get up at 5, I would try and get an hour of solid writing before anyone woke up, and then I'd be editing and hitting publish on the post while still getting the kids ready for school or for kindergarten. But it was really essential in terms of my development of my craft, because by writing in those kind of intense bursts, I sort of developed this muscle that I still use today, which allows me to write in the cracks of my life. So I don't have like hours and hours to write. I just write in these short, intense bursts. You know, and I generated 270,000 words, which is, you know, maybe four novels, 5 novels worth. And, you know, I got over 500,000 views from 50,000 visitors. So it was pretty successful. But I then went through quite a painful divorce, and the life that I'd been writing about sort of didn't feel like, you know, I could be flippant and on a comedy blog about it anymore. It was too painful and too personal. And also I'd been hoping that this would kind of create a bridge into getting published as a novelist, as a fiction writer. But I did get some attention from publishers, but was only ever from non-fiction publishers who wanted me to turn the blog into a book. And I wasn't really interested in that, because I felt like I'd said everything I wanted to say in the blog, and I really hate rehashing my work. So I put the blog aside and embarked on writing long form fiction. Now this photo was taken outside the Cornucopia restaurant in Dublin but it was actually in this restaurant in July 2013 that I wrote the first paragraph of my first manuscript. It actually took another whole year before I wrote the second paragraph of my first manuscript, but we won't go into that. But this photo wasn't actually taken in 2013. I always think it would be a bit odd to write a paragraph and then go outside and pose for a photo. Have tickets on yourself if you're doing that. This is actually taken 5 years and 3 whole manuscripts later, when I was visiting Dublin with my husband and 3 of our kids, and that's my son to the left, getting ready to photobomb. He's waiting very patiently. At this point, when this photo was taken, I was still 9 months away from winning the Penguin Literary Prize. So, you know, I'm wondering, how did I get there? How did I get from writing that first paragraph in that Dublin restaurant to winning that prize? Well, here's the secret to my success. I submitted a lot. This is my submission spreadsheet. It's not the full spreadsheet. It's probably about half of it, or maybe a third. So every time I sent any of my work anywhere, I recorded it in my spreadsheet, whether it was to a competition or a prize or a publisher or a query to a literary agent. And so I tracked the results and you know, the dates that announcements would be made. If you notice all the grey in the left-hand column, that's all my rejections, when I got a outright rejection or never heard anything back. The yellow is when I was longlisted or shortlisted, and the green is when I had like a win, even if it was just a small win. You've got to celebrate your wins. So it wasn't a straightforward path for me to publication. And I like to stress that, you know, behind every success, there's generally like 100 rejections. So it's always worth remembering that if you are trying to get your work published, whether, you know, it's a novel or a short story, you know, it's a hard path. And I took a few detours on the way. So by the end of 2017, I'd had so many grey cells in my spreadsheet that I pivoted, you know, long before, you know, pivoting was like hashtag so hot right now. I turned back to writing short stories. I did this for 2 reasons. One was because I really love writing, but I hate trying to get published. And at this stage, I had written 3 manuscripts. And I'd just gotten a bit down in the mouth, and so I wanted to reconnect with that love of writing. And also I was hoping to have a couple of quick wins. It'd been over 25 years since I'd last written a short story. So I was astounded when I started getting shortlisted and even winning some prizes. And this is a photo of me having just won first prize, much to my surprise. Look at that grin. I could not stop smiling. Yes, at the Borondara Literary Awards here in Melbourne. So yes, so by the end of 2018, I'd had so much success with my short stories that I'd actually decided to put my manuscripts for my novels aside and focus on building up a short story collection in 2019. I said 2019 is going to be a year of the short story. And I had pretty much forgotten that I'd even entered the Penguin Literary Prize when I got an email in February 2019 saying I'd been shortlisted for it. So that was a huge surprise. I had another detour that I had to take too. Around the same time that I was sort of, embarking on my short story odyssey, something else shifted in me. And to explain this, I have to go back a couple of years to 2015 when I started working alongside these two magnificent human beings in this photo. We didn't work in the photo. We worked together in a small arts organization. But actually the person who's relevant to the story is the one in the middle. And I just apologize to Tim. This isn't about you, Tim, not today. The magnificent human being in the middle is my dear friend, Emily Collier, a fellow writer who I would talk at length, probably bore, about, my wins and my disappointments, and she would share hers with me. And by about October 2015, I was feeling pretty cocky. I'd had some good luck with my first manuscript, and I was feeling like a publishing contract was, just around the corner. I could taste it. And in a moment of like mad optimism, I suggested to Emily that should we both achieve certain writing goals within the next year, in my case it was having my first manuscript published or getting a contract for publication, we should get matching tattoos. I'd never had a tattoo before. I was, just shy of my 45th birthday. But I got all reckless and said, yep, let's do this. Let's make this pact. And Emily, to her credit, just agreed with me, was standing next to the microwave at work, and she said, yep, and we shook hands. And I had this idea that I wanted an ampersand, the and symbol, because I thought it was writerly. And we agreed this is what we were going to do. We were going to get matching ampersand tattoos. But then 3 weeks after that, Emily, its life took a very different turn. She found out she had breast cancer, and her focus naturally turned completely away from writing and towards her treatment. And at one point during her treatment, she told me she wasn't sure that she would ever return to writing. Even after her treatment had ended, she wasn't sure that that's what she wanted to do anymore. And I supported her, but I felt very worried for her. It was one thing to be a writer who didn't write, because let's face it, I'd done quite a bit of that. But to be a writer who no longer even said they wanted to write, I don't know, I felt sad. Luckily, there's a happy ending to this story. And I just want to add that right now before we start worrying about Emily. She finished her treatment and she's now in remission. And she started to write about her treatment. And then she started to write about other things, and then more and more. And she came back fully to writing. And through Emily's journey, I realized that the symbol of the ampersand, this tattoo that we'd chosen, it was not about an achievement of a particular goal, but it was more about our commitment to writing, to the writing we'd already done, the writing we would always do. And even though neither of us actually had achieved those goals that we'd set next to the microwave in 2015, almost 2 years after that shaking of the hands and the pact, we went out and we got the tattoos anyway. And there we are with our tattoos wrapped in plastic. For the record, it hurt a lot and I won't be getting any further tattoos. And here's another photo of a close-up of the photos of the tattoos. I'll let you guess which one is the actual tattoo, the ampersand tattoo, and which one is just a novelty one we had at a party. But anyway, and then there was another detour I had to take. I trained for the men's team pursuit for the 2016 Olympics in Rio de Janeiro and won silver for Australia. Hooray. For anyone who actually caught me on the radio on ABC, I did mention that I would include at least one slide which would contain an outright lie. I'm not saying which one it is, but it might have something to do with the tattoo and ampersand. Anyway, moving along. Oh, look, I'm just, in case you missed me in the photo, look at me. I'm so proud of my silver medal for the men's pursuit. I don't know anything about cycling. Anyway, so now here we are. We're at the point where I'm winning the Penguin Literary Prize. So to recap, I'd given up my novels for the moment but had made a renewed commitment to writing and my love of just doing it. I was a freshly inked badass. I was ready to jump into my short story collection, and I got this email that I'd been shortlisted. I was one of 5 shortlisted novels out of a total of 400 or so manuscripts. And then I waited. Anyone who's ever had to wait for an announcement knows what that's like. You're hitting refresh constantly on your email, and you're trying to second guess when the news will come. You're doing things like, oh, well, okay, so they're saying that the announcement will be made on the 17th of March. Will that mean that they'll tell us the week before? Will they email us? Will they phone us? Does the winner already know and I'm waiting in vain? All these things going around and around in your head. So there was no part of me that expected, in all of this sort of speculation about how I would find out, that the news would come to me on a Sunday afternoon. I was sitting in just behind here while my stepdaughters were talking about The Shining. My eldest stepdaughter was explaining the plot in incredible detail to her younger sister. And I was idly on my phone, probably making a shopping list, and I just checked my email out of habit without any expectation that there'd be anything in there. And there was an email from Meredith Kernow, and I kind of vaguely remembered the name, but as I opened it, I had no idea it was the Meredith Kernow, the convener of the prize, with the news that I'd been waiting for. So I started reading this email, and it started with this very coy little question that was like, "Dear Imbi, how do you feel about winning the Penguin Literary Prize?" And I gasped so loudly that my stepdaughter, my eldest stepdaughter, thought she'd just spoiled the ending of The Shining for me. And for the record, she hadn't. And also for the record, I felt really, 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 really good about winning the Penguin Literary Prize, in case Meredith was wondering. We immediately abandoned all the plans we had for the day and went for lunch instead to celebrate. And at one point in the lunch, I went to the bathroom. It's a little bit too much information, but I saw my reflection for the first time since I'd won the prize. And I had to take a bathroom selfie. I'm not the kind of person who normally takes a bathroom selfie, but I had to capture that feeling. And here is the picture that I took. You see that amount of emotion. I was overwhelmed and bursting at the seams. And the thing was, I had to sit on that news and hide that feeling for a couple of weeks. I had to go about my job, my day job at the University of Melbourne, and not tell anybody. And it was really hard because I'm a natural oversharer, as you can probably tell from the photo. And on the 17th of March, 2019, just over a year ago, I flew to Adelaide at a time when we could still leave the state of Victoria to receive the prize at the Leading Edge Books Conference there. And I took another photo just before I went into the hotel. And there I am with my friend Kate Larson, who had dropped me off. I said I was coming to stay with her in Adelaide, but I didn't tell her the reason. And then, when she picked me up from the airport, she's like, "So why are you here?" And I would just burst like a dam, like, "Oh my God, I'm here to win the prize." So that's us. We were pretty excited together. And then I walked into the hotel to receive the prize. Now, I thought I would just stand on the stage and sort of wave, give a little kind of Queen's wave, and that would be it. But as we walked into the venue, Meredith Kernow, my now publisher, the convener of the prize, turned to me and said sort of casually, "Oh, so do you think you would like to say a couple of words?" Now, I'm a writer. I can talk a lot, but when it comes to giving speeches, I like to write every single word because I want every word to count and to land. And my instinct was to say, no, I do not want to say a speech. I don't want to say a few words. But then I saw the room was full of independent booksellers, and these were the people that would be selling my book in the future. And I thought, I need to make an impression. I need to step up and be a capital A author. And so I said, yes, I will say a few words. And I stood up at the lectern in front of all these independent booksellers and one ex-prime minister who shall remain nameless. And I babbled incoherently for what felt like hours. It was probably only a minute or so, but it really did feel like I went for hours. And then I ended the whole thing by waving cheerfully at the crowd and saying, it's nice to meet you all. Like pretty much that tone. And then I stepped down from the lectern and I blushed for about the next 7 weeks. I really do feel like I made an impression. My publisher, Meredith, said it wasn't that bad, but I know she's just trying to make me feel better. Anyway, so what happened next? I have this winning manuscript and it's going to become a book. So surely it's won the prize. So it would just go straight. They just press print and it'd go off. No, because I had to go through the editing process. The first stage of the editing process is called the structural edit for people who haven't been through this agony. The structural edit, I've used a screenshot from the movie Minority Report. I always want to say Mission Impossible. It starts with an M. Anyway, and it's just because it's a big picture edit. It's when you kind of might do a restructure or change your ending or even add or delete characters. I'm happy to report my structural edit was reasonably light. And when we come to the bit where I talk about the structure of my book, you'll be glad on my behalf. It was basically a lightly marked up Word document, and I had a 2-week residency in the Blue Mountains that I had thanks to the Henry Handel Richardson Society at the beautiful Varuna House, the Writers' House of Australia. And I made the changes then, and I spent 2 weeks reading my manuscript out loud because someone had said to me, if you read your whole manuscript out loud, you can hear how the language is flowing. And I, even though I felt like a little bit of a wanker, I read my manuscript out loud, and it was really good advice, the reading out loud thing. But my timing was rubbish because just around the corner was the copy edit phase. And this is a more forensic look at the book, the real deep dive into the language, into continuity, inconsistencies, loose ends in the plot. This screen, just to explain what you're looking at, if you see the red marks, that's the editor's notes, and the blue marks represent the tears of the author. I actually really enjoyed this stage. I really felt, I mean, I've never formally studied writing except for those screenwriting courses I did in London. So I actually learned so much about my strengths and my weaknesses and my quirks. As I said in my radio interview with ABC Warrnambool the other day, I discovered that all my characters are always sighing and looking down at their hands or feet or the ground while harboring very tight feelings in their chest. And I think that's probably because I do a lot of that, and it's actually a miracle I don't run into more things. Anyway, and then after the copy edit stage, you go into the proofreading where you get the actual printed pages. And this is really your last chance to make changes. Hopefully not big ones. Hopefully you've already done all the big changes in the structural edit and then in the copy edit. And at this point we had an external person because my editor, Genevieve, and I were too close to the work. So we brought someone else in to read and make sure that all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed. I did a little diary on Twitter while I was doing this. I'll just go through it. Day 1, there's really not that many changes. Day 3, why are there so many changes? Day 7, the timeline is completely wrong. Day 9, my words are setting like concrete. Day 12, I don't even know what a comma is anymore. It was intense. And I should add here that in between the copy edit with all those blue text representing the author's tears and this stage, I got married. I had my second wedding to my second husband, and we had people coming from Ireland, where he's from, and from all over Australia. And yes, so we were having sort of interstate and international guests staying with us, and a party for almost 200 people. So that was a really good combination, not one that I would recommend to a lot of people. And then we basically entered the COVID days. I sent my manuscript off, go, well, little book, I'll see you when you're printed. And then I started wondering if I was going to be published, if my book would actually have to be sacrificed for the god of toilet paper, and the paper that would be used for printing it would be turned into toilet paper instead. But luckily, that didn't happen. And one day, late in April, a box arrived, and this is what happened.
Good stuff there, Imbi.
I think it's not.
It's like Back to the Future. Hey, George, this just arrived. What is it? It's for you, Mr. McFly. It's for you, Mr. McFly. It's for you. What is it? What is it?
Yeah, so that's what it's like to be almost 50 and to be holding your book for the very first time. I still feel emotional just seeing it. Okay, so here we are, the spill. This is finally getting to the spill. People ask me, what is it about? And I usually give them the elevator pitch, which is, no two people ever experience or remember the same thing in the same way, especially when they're sisters. After I've given this elevator pitch, the next question people tend to ask me is, does it really come with a free cup of tea? And of course, the answer to that is no. Think about the logistics. And then the question after that is, what inspired the book? So at the heart of this book is this car accident. And it's loosely based on a car accident that I was in when I was 10. The car looked fine. After we were waiting along the side of the road, and looked back over the car, it sort of flipped on its side. And I thought, it looks fine. It's fine. We'll be able to drive home. And then when we looked at it later, it wasn't fine. It was completely wrecked. We went to the wrecking yard, or the mechanics where it had been towed. There was no way anyone was going to drive that car. And I really felt that was how the accident was for me. I was ostensibly fine. I had a couple of stitches, and my mum was fine and my sister was fine, but I felt the impact of that accident for decades afterwards. I still feel it to this day. It fundamentally changed something in me and how I experience the world. And I really wanted to explore those moments, small and large, upon which an entire life can be spun around or can pivot. So I started to imagine two fictitious sisters and their mother in the car accident. Where had they come from? Where were they going? Why did they crash? What happened next? And then, of course, I had to do a obligatory fuzzy felt tableau of the opening scene. This is the opening chapter. We have the car has flipped. We've got Tina, the mother, drinking in the Bruce Rock pub. We have the two sisters, Nicole and Samantha, running towards their father, Craig, who's just driven from Perth in his RX-7, Mazda RX-7, to pick them up. So I doubt you will ever see another author talk with a fuzzy felt tableau. So just savor this moment. Now we'll come to the themes of the spill. So there are three main themes. The first, except that's the technical wizardry I was talking about before. First theme is sisters. I find the sister relationship the most fascinating of all family dynamics. I've got two sisters. A lot of my friends have sisters. And over the years, I've heard so many stories of miscommunications and misunderstandings and jealousy and resentment, but also this incredible love and fierce loyalty. So I really was interested in exploring that more. And then memory, which I touched on before. I'm fascinated about that gap between what we experience at the time and how we choose to remember it. I think we all sort of edit out details conveniently, things that we don't want to carry with us or don't want to remember or don't fit the narratives that we kind of weave about ourselves and our lives. So I was really interested in exploring those gaps. And the third thing, it's a jolly thing, alcoholism, yay. I didn't actually set out to write a book about alcoholism. It was a sort of theme that came through exploring some of the characters. And at the heart of the novel, it's not a spoil to say it, the mother, Tina, who was driving the car at the time of the accident, there's a question about whether or not she was drunk at the time. And that's something that the sisters feel very differently about. I didn't want to have a black and white alcohol is bad kind of book. I wanted to explore the kind of broad spectrum of people's relationships with alcohol, because, you know, it's not black and white. And for a lot of people, it's not a problem, but for some people, it does cause a real problem for them and the loved ones around them. So, but I didn't want to be judgy McJudge pants. I wanted to kind of explore it with sort of empathy and understanding. So then I've got this structure, what I subtitle Why I Like to Make Things Difficult for Myself. I describe the book as a club sandwich that is also a jigsaw puzzle. And you're probably losing you at this point. People are dropping out of the Zoom going, what is this woman talking about? I'll explain. So I use the club sandwich metaphor because I liked this idea of starting the book with the period just after the accident and ending the book with the time just before the accident, and then having the actual accident itself right as the midpoint. So they're the layers of bread. And then I also had this idea of having this present day narrative. This is when the two sisters are sort of fully grown. Their mother, Tina, has just passed away. Again, that's not a spoiler because that happens in chapter 2. And I don't think anything that happens in chapter 2 can be a spoiler. And so I have these present day narratives, which are kind of like the meat of the story. And then we keep going back into the past to see how the sisters experience these pivotal moments in their lives at the time. And they are the tomato and the mayonnaise and the lettuce of the story. So these are all different layers which build up, you know, the bigger picture or club sandwich of these two sisters, how they were impacted by the characters and how they came to be who they are. And you may be pleased to know that that is where the club sandwich metaphor ends, but we're going into the jigsaw metaphor. So with those past chapters, I treated it like a jigsaw puzzle. So in my head, my memory is like this huge box of unconnected jigsaw pieces. And every now and again, I'm able to piece some together. So it felt like a really good literary advice to be just handing the readers one piece at a time so that slowly they can build up the larger picture of the two sisters. And again, how they've become who they are and you know, and where they might be going next. So how did I manage to write this? Spreadsheet time. It's another spreadsheet, of course. On the left-hand side, I was able to kind of to sort the chapters in the order that they appear in the book, or I could look at them in chronological order in the order that actually happened in the sisters' lives. The whole book is made up of 100 tiny mysteries. So the blurred bit of the spreadsheet, this was hiding spoilers from you, tracked which micro mystery was introduced or progressed or resolved in each chapter, because I wanted to make sure that every chapter kind of earned its place in the larger story. And on the right, I kept track of all the characters' ages and, you know, where they lived at the time. So it was really too much information for me to hold in my brain. So having this spreadsheet really helped me. So in summary, the spill, it's about sisters, it's about memory and alcoholism, and it's like a sandwich jigsaw managed by a giant overcomplicated delivery. And then we come to the last, and I'm going to pop these links into the chat. So if you are interested in following me on Twitter or on Instagram or on Facebook, or even just checking out my website, you can do so. But thank you for listening to my very long presentation. I'll stop sharing. Here I am. It was me all along. And I'll just put those things in the chat. Were there any questions, Jane?
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay, let me just open up. We've got first question. What was your original word count and what was your expected finished word count?
Oh, okay.
Did the editors provide a special editing program software that you were required to use?
No, they're really good questions and ones I haven't had before. And for some reason I can't add anything in the chat, but that's okay. I have a very unusual name. So if you just Google me, you will, maybe I can send those details to you, Jane, and you can share them in the larger chat.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll just do that. And then I'll answer this very good question. So okay, so in terms of word count, I mean, people talk about, how long is a novel? And that really, I think it's not that helpful to think of work in terms of word count, like aiming for something. You got to kind of let the story go. So it might just be a short story, or it might be a novella, or it might be, a reasonably short novel, or it might be a series. So the story dictates the real length. But generally speaking, you're aiming with a novel to be between about 75,000 words up to about 100,000, I think, especially for debut novels. I think once you're established and you're J.K. Rowling and you can have 50,000 words in all caps of Harry Potter shouting, you've got a bit more sort of freedom. But so I always aim for 75,000 or 80,000. And for some reason, I just never quite make it. So my first drafts always tend to just be edging up to 70,000. But then through the editing process, I think it ended up being 80,000 in all, because you've got an editor sort of questioning everything and going, well, why this? Or I'd like a little bit more information. So you're sort of fleshing out stuff a bit. And in terms of software, no, we just use Microsoft Word. So I use Scrivener for my writing, and because I tend to write things with really complex structures. So Scrivener, which is spelled Scrivener, so Scrivener, is really great for that, because it has this kind of cork board view. So if you imagine, like, some writers like to make a kind of a scene card, like out of cards, to lay it out and move things around, and Scrivener allows you to do that digitally, and for me to get that sort of aerial view of my story is just really important. And people tell me that you can do it in Word, but I just really like Scrivener. It's not that expensive. It was like $70, $80 for a license, which you can have on 3 computers. So you could even share it with a friend, but I'm sure Scrivener wouldn't want me to say that to you. But anyway, so that's what I use for my writing. But for the editing, it was just all through Word track changes, which is, that's why there was all the blue and the red, or the tiers. Not my favorite way of writing, because it's sort of, hard to kind of keep track of like which comments you've resolved and which ones you haven't, and responding, and it just looks terrifying when you open it up for the first time. You think, dear God, is there any of my original book still there? Apparently there was quite a lot.
Thank you. We've got a message here from Christine. She says, love the fuzzy felt tableau. How much research did you need to do into the psychology behind the different perceptions of an event experienced by 2 different people, and why it is different?
Yeah, that's look, the idea for having these 2 sisters remembering something so differently came from a friend who had this massive argument with her own sister about their childhood and about something that had happened, and they both remembered it so differently. It was like it was completely different events. Like I couldn't reconcile the 2 different accounts, and it really got me thinking. In terms of research around that, I tend to write from my gut. I did do some research, particularly around alcoholism, and Tina, the mother, she does die from a liver related sort of failure. So I did do research into that, and consulted with my doctor friends. I really, if you're a doctor, please don't become my friend, because I will hound you with questions about hospital procedures, and you just don't want that. But yes, so yeah, I'm an observer, and like I went to 8 different schools, so I was always the new kid in class, and I spent a lot of time when I started in a new school observing who was who, and, you know, who were the popular kids, and how everyone was wearing their socks. For some reason, socks were really important. So I think I've always carried that sort of new girl perspective as an adult, and in fact, I've changed jobs a lot. So I'm always collecting stories and sort of just, you know, remembering sort of certain reactions that people have to things. So it was sort of, the research has been pretty much my whole life. And yeah, so that was, hopefully that answers that question. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a quick question I wanted to ask. Your book cover design.
Yes. Oh, yes, here it is.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about the artwork and the concept?
Yeah. So basically, I drew this. No, I didn't draw it. There's another lie for you. There is a funny story about this cover. When I went to Varuna, up in the Blue Mountains, I went in on a sort of a day trip. I had my first grown-up author day, where I met my publishers and went into their office, and I met my agent for the first time. She's based in Sydney, and, you know, it was a very exciting day. And I got to meet lots of people at Penguin and talk about my book for the first time as an author. And someone asked me also, have you got any ideas about the cover? And I said, no, because I had zero ideas about my cover. I said, I made a joke. I said, except I'd like my name in huge gold letters, and I'd like my name to be bigger than the title. And then this happened. They actually did it. I don't think it was actually based on that throwaway line, but I did think it was hilarious. And there's actually another funny story about this. So I never saw any of the other covers. I mean, they did ask for my input. They said, what do you like in a cover and what don't you like in a cover? And for some reason, I never liked photos on covers. I think it's because when I was at university, I was a real snob, and I only ever bought the book like the original cover, as opposed to with the major motion picture kind of still on the cover. So I think that's why I've got an aversion. Having said that, I have read lots of great books with photos, and particularly photos of people on the cover. So I you know, my snobbery is not well founded. So I sent them lots of pictures of things that I liked and I didn't like. And then this came to me, and I was just like, my first thing was like, oh my God, that's so beautiful. That's much more beautiful than my book. How can my book go into that? And then the other thing was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to do all these events when I'm holding this beautiful book, and I'm almost 50 and I can't compete with this. So they were the first two thoughts. And then something interesting happened, because my initial feeling was like, this felt like an East Coast. This felt like a Pacific Ocean cover, right? To me, from my memory of Perth. And I sort of said, I think of Perth as being more turquoise, but I love the colour scheme, but I don't know, is it Perth? And they held, you know, they stood their ground and didn't change a thing. And I knew in my heart that I loved it, so I didn't want it changed. But when I exchanged emails with the designer, Alex Ross, who's just done such beautiful work, turned out that he'd spent some of his childhood in Perth too, and he was drawing on his memory of Perth. So his memory of Perth was very different from my memory of Perth. And I went, well, that's perfect for the book. So that's the story about the cover. So yes.
Excellent. No, that's great. We've talked just a little bit about Tina, the mum, without giving anything away. You've talked so much about the sisters. We've got Nicole and Samantha. Do you want to give us just a little bit of Nicole and Samantha?
Okay, well, Nicole and Samantha, they're very different. And when we first meet them as adults in sort of, you know, the present day, and if you've been following, that's the meat part of the club sandwich. They're very much estranged, and they're quite different personality types. And when I was writing them, the way that I always describe it is, I always think of Nicole, the elder sister, as being a bit formless, like steam. She's like a gas, and she slowly solidifies through the course of the novel. And then Samantha, the younger sister, she's more like ice, and she slowly thaws. So they kind of meet, and I won't say how, but there is a reconciliation. And I don't think that's a spoiler. Anyway, it's probably good because there's so many grim things in this. Divorce, there's, you know, alcoholism and stuff. There's lots of humor in it because I can't help but write jokes. Yeah. And there was one scene that was cut out near the end where my editor said to me, look, this scene's really funny, but I don't think it belongs here. I just don't think we should have a funny scene. And I was like, okay, so I'll just use that funny scene in another book. Yeah, so they're the two sisters. And Tina, I like to think of Tina as the missing piece of the puzzle. She's the one piece, like we don't ever really get inside her head except for one time, which is when I give a piece of the puzzle to the reader, but the reader only. Like the two sisters will never have that. So yeah, so Tina was interesting and fun to write. She's a really fun character. She's a fun drunk, but I didn't want to condone that kind of party girl thing. So she does pay the price. I mean, she dies from alcoholism. So it's not like I'm letting her get away with that. I'm saying, oh, that's a really, you know, great life choice. Go for it. But she's the kind of the life of every chapter that she's in. You can't help but love Tina, but also feel incredibly frustrated with her. And I think that's one thing that a lot of readers is like, they feel, you know, a lot of frustration with these characters because they're all just kind of missing each other and not talking. And I think one of the things I would hope that someone who read this book, as they, you know, come back into their own, as they leave Perth and, you know, Western Australia behind, that they think about those stories from their own families, you know, the stories that we tell each other about things that happened where Uncle Bill did whatever, and actually revisit them and consider those stories from another perspective. Like, you know, was there more to that than this funny anecdote? And I think you'll find that there's, you know, stuff that we've kind of missed or we've forgotten or dropped along the way.
Excellent. Now, we didn't touch on the title. Can you give us something from the title or where that came about?
Well, the story goes that originally the title was called, the working title for the first draft was Each Other. I really liked sort of that each other, and the more I thought about it, I was like, oh, it sort of suggests the separateness of sisters, but also the togetherness. And, you know, I was always remembering when I was growing up, my dad was always saying, you've got to look after each other. But by the end of the first draft, I felt like that just was too sort of oblique as a title. And I started thinking about different words for accident, because the accident was really, you know, at the heart of the novel. And one of the first words I thought of was spill, like, you know, and the minute my brain touched on that, it just sort of went boop, 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 because there was just so much spilling. You know, there's the accident, there's the spilling secrets, there's the spilling of kind of liquid, maybe wine. There's at one point a whole box of jigsaw puzzle pieces get spilt. And there's also the father, Craig, by the time we meet him in the present day, he's onto his third wife, and he's been living in the same house the entire time. And every time he has a new wife, there's a new color scheme, new kind of decor. And I sort of like to think of that as sort of like an administration. So, you know, with the change of leadership, there's this sort of new administration in the house. So it just felt like it worked for lots of different parts of the book. I mean, you know, often when I'm reading books, I'm thinking the entire novel, like, why is it called X? Like, you know, and is there going to be a point where I understand why it's called this? And then that's not to say that there haven't been books that I have that I've loved. I've loved books with obscure titles, but I feel like, yeah, you in reading The Spill, you would understand why it's called The Spill.
Excellent, great. So we're nearly hitting our 8:30 mark.
Yeah,
yes, so well done you for all that talking to us. Just before we wrap up, our listeners might not know you've been in lockdown. This is round 2. How's that affected your writing?
Look, I've the round one, I was very skittish the first month and couldn't focus at all. And I just started to get warmed up. I'm revisiting one of my earlier manuscripts and trying to get that ready, hopefully, you know, to one day be published, with all my, you know, new skills that I learned through the editorial process for the spill. And then I started the whole publicity thing for the spill, and so that's taken up a lot of my time. I've still been working. I've got 5 teenagers in my life. They're all watching Jaws in another room at the house, and so I'm glad that we haven't heard any screams. But yeah, so this second lockdown, I don't know, it feels harder. I think it's because things had just started opening up. I'd really planned during the school holidays to go and visit some book shops on the other side of Melbourne. We were actually going to get out of town. We're going to go to a little place just past Ballarat, and, you know, I was hoping to stop off in the bookshop in Ballarat and have a look at my book, you know, so basically go visiting. And it took a couple of days after the lockdown had happened, you know, and had to cancel our holiday. And when I had this sudden thought of, oh my God, by the time we come out of lockdown, my book Stay in the Sun will be over. I mean, I'm hoping it'll still be in bookshelves, you know, and in bookshops, but it won't be at the front of the shop. It won't be the new release, you know, on the front display. It'll be kind of at the back. And I thought, I've waited so long to be published, and I'm not going to really visit. And I did a really sad little post on my social media, and much to my immense joy and gratitude, people have been tagging me and emailing me and private messaging me photos of my book, that when they've seen it, they've taken a photo and they've sent it to me, and that has made me feel happy. It's proof that it was out there, even if I personally didn't see it.
Yes, well, we wish you so much, well, first of all, getting through these next few weeks, but can't wait to see what comes of your next manuscript. It sounds like that the 2019 Penguin Literary Prize was one that was very well chosen. The amount of detail and work that you've put into this, the spill, just sounds amazing. I can't wait to actually get my hand on it, but the reservation list is running hot at the library. We're back open, so people can reserve it or get out into Warrnambool and buy yourself a copy. I'm sure that'll be most appreciated by Imbi. So we thank you so much for joining us tonight, Imbi, and everybody can find Imbi on social media. We've got imbineeme.com. Now, Twitter, I've got the NDM, is that correct?
Yep.
And Instagram, Imbi Neeme, and Facebook is Imbi Neeme Writer. So you've got all the social media covered by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I'm not on Tinder, and
no TikTok.
No, I'm not on TikTok, so I don't have energy for that. But I'm on all the social media for all the older set.
Yes. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, we really look forward to the time and the day when we can actually host you in person in Warrnambool, and we can actually expand on this and have a fantastic time when the time is right.
Yeah, when the time is right. There's no point rushing these things, as we've learnt. But yes, so thanks so much for having me, Jane, in Warrnambool Library, and just, you know, what a wonderful opportunity to speak to you. And thanks for giving your time tonight and listening to me, Christine and Sherry and Jan and iPhone. I'm not going to remember that number because that's probably
who else have we got? We've got Donna. I'm just trying to see. Yes. There's a few more that we've had, some that have been in and out, and we might have had a few glitches there.
It was the club sandwich, wasn't it? It was when there's the club sandwich. It's just like people are like, nah, I'm out. It's not for me.
That's okay. Well, I'm going to wrap up the meeting, but if you want to stay on for a minute, Imbi, I'll just have a quick chat with you at the end.
No problem.
Okay, thanks everybody. I'm going to time out your connections.